This is Automotive Advertising with your hosts Jim Flint and Janine Loving-Drake.
Hi, my name's Janine Loving-Drake. I'm here with Jim Flint from Local Search Group. We're going to talk about controlled growth today.
Okay.
And how we look as an operational marketing agency at controlled growth and try to help our dealers, right? Because I know that they're really they're fighting for every deal as the margins are slimming.
For sure.
Over
and we're
time.
looking at the numbers all the time.
And we're
trying
looking
to find
at
that
those
value.
numbers, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So numbers are important to us. So let's talk about controlled growth. At the end, we'll kind of wrap it up with an actual equation that we use for our dealers that has stood the test of time, that has helped a lot of our dealers protect net profit. But
let's go back in time to start out this conversation. And Bob Beamon, some of you may know, but if you haven't heard the story, he actually many years ago broke the long jump record during the Olympic Games. Good news is he won the gold medal. But the interesting thing about the experience that he had, right, and I'm looking at this data because that's what we're able to do. Controlled growth is really about understanding the data, whether it's a 20 group or a financial statement or the different ratios. And really, that's what's at the end. We're going to talk about the ratios that are going to help drive your business. Mm-hmm. But I noticed in looking at some data that I wasn't around at this time. So the data, though, compelled me to understand it a little bit better. He broke the long jump record, right, by 21 2/3 inches.
Wow.
So he almost jumped 2 feet further than anyone else had previously jumped. Mm-hmm. And in the 13 times that the record was broken in the 12 previous years, the record was only broken by, on average, 2.5 inches.
Okay, which would make sense.
Right, just little incremental growth, controlled growth.
Yes.
And so I use Bob Beamon. I don't know the man, respect the man, but he had this incredible event. He had this moment in time, but he never jumped farther than 28 feet after that. So he had this amazing experience, but that's not what we're trying to do. With our clients, we're not trying to have that one moment in time. Sure, somebody's going to win the lottery,
right,
but we're talking about sustained growth. And so that's really what's going to drive our thinking. And it actually took another 23 years for someone to break his record.
Right.
So all the conditions came together. He had that moment.
Yeah. It's like the 10-pound deal, right? That you get, I don't know, when we're all struggling, right?
You can't count on
every
it.
deal. You can't count on it. It's just not going to happen.
That's right.
It's great when it does, and we can celebrate, but
yeah, it's kind of
like a unicorn.
Too.
Yeah,
it is a unicorn, and that's a good analogy. I was also thinking, I know, I've been to a lot of car shows. Dealers love Vegas, right? It's like playing the slot machine. But as there's more pressure on pricing, as there's more pressure on margin, as there's more pressure on inventory, right? We need to be thinking about not necessarily the slot machine, right? But the vending machine. Because consumers are wanting to put money in and they want to know what they're getting out.
Sure.
And so that's where I'd like to take the conversation today, if you will.
Yeah, so we were talking about the how the NFL, right, and sports really kind of ties into controlled growth. I mean, if you take a look, right, historically, and I am not the NFL guru, but I do like to follow certain athletes, and I think that you notice a pattern, right, of success when it comes to athletes, and the fact that it's this, the long jump scenario was 1 in a million, but if you take a look, it's the consistency and kind of the controlled growth that certain athletes, have done to stand the test of time. And like Drew Brees. So we were talking about the 9, right? So Drew Brees from the New Orleans Saints had a great quote. And it's so funny how it ties in with the automotive industry. But he says, by no means have I arrived. I had a coach tell me, as long as you're green, must have been a car guy.
Yeah, probably so.
You will continue to grow. But as soon as you're ripe, you'll soon be rotten. I think it's just a great analogy of how, once you think you've arrived is, as soon as you think that, you're defeated. So, as long as we're always, thinking that, striving to get that, and it's the extra 2.5 inches, right, that we want to achieve every year over year, as we want to get just a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. That's kind of that approach.
Yeah,
right?
And I'm going to take us down one more path on the storytelling side of the NBA. As I listened to Game 7 when the Lakers were going to play the Celtics, and Doc Rivers was sharing a pregame conversation with his team, and he said he went and asked Tony Dungy, who happened to be the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, the year that the Colts won the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. What was it that they did, right? What was the miracle moment that happened that made all the difference to make everything come together? And he said that he was struck by the fact that Dungy just shook his head. And he said, there wasn't that moment. There wasn't a Hail Mary. There wasn't this play. He said, but you know what happened? Every little time we needed that extra yard on 3rd and 1, it seemed like we got it. Mm-hmm. Or if it was 3rd and 4, Peyton got the other team to jump off sides.
Right.
And our guys didn't jump off sides. Or we held them when it was their play at, 3rd and 3. They didn't get the first down. But our receiver, when it was, 2nd and 7 or 3rd and 7, they would run the pattern and they would make the cut 8 yards out so that they could move the chains.
Yes.
And it wasn't that they made a 67-yard field goal. It was that they made each and every one of their extra points. And he said, guys, go out there tonight, and I want you to take care of the defense. Take the shots when they're there, and do the little things right. Because when you do the little things right, the big things take care of themselves. Yes. And that's what controlled growth is really about.
Small, consistent improvements, right? So are you ready to jump into Moneyball a little bit?
I'm ready if you are. Let's go.
Yeah. So I think that anytime I can help dealers come up with a solution to their problems is just amazing. So, so you came up with an equation called the Moneyball Factor years ago. How long ago was that you started looking at it?
2010.
2010. Okay, so it's another 9 years.
There we go.
So basically, what the equation is it's your number of website visits divided by car sales. Right? So for every 10,000 visits, how many cars are you selling? And what...
you better sell 100 cars in that deal.
Better sell 100 cars in that deal.
New or used, so it's all inclusive.
All inclusive. Right. And I think that don't get maybe necessarily hung up on the percentage, but you track over time what that percentage looks like. And I think what you had found at the time with the group you were working with is that the dealers that were holding an average between around 2%. Is that correct? I'm going to throw 2 out there, dealers that were around 2% Moneyball Factor were holding the highest net profit.
Indeed.
And so dealers that were selling below the 2%, your findings were that they had specific issues, and the dealers that were selling way above that money factor had a whole different set of issues. Do you want to speak to that? Because that's very interesting.
And I do want to bring it up to speed in terms of today's current automotive environment. And that number has moved, and I kind of look at the barometer now at 1%. If you're at 1.5 or 1.6, and those percentage points do matter, because you're basically talking about how many car deals you're getting out of how many visitors are coming to your website. And so it was ahead of its time at that moment, but now I think...
It's 9 years old and things have changed.
Yeah, and like you said with your quote here earlier from Drew Brees, you got to stay green and you keep looking for the correlations and the relationships. And so because everybody is on the web now, and because the traffic to the dealerships has gone down, you see that there's more activity on the websites, and thus that's put more pressure. And so what it really means is if you're above 1.0, you're moving into an area of highly correlated profitability. If you're moving below 1.0, you have some issues that you need to address, because you should be working to at least sell one car deal out of every 100 visitors to your website. The key to me, though, is that when you're below 1.0, because I think a lot of our listeners are going to want to know, how can we fix the problem?
Right.
And typically what I see at that point is that you're over-advertising. Right? And that's strange because we're an advertising agency,
when
right?
You're above.
When you're at 0.8 or 0.6,
okay,
you're getting too many visitors to your website with without the corresponding vehicle sales.
Gotcha.
And so what you want to understand in that process is you want to look at a couple of things to correct, because you shouldn't spend a penny on advertising of any kind, really, until you have alignment with your inventory levels. Okay. And I think this year the inventory levels are much higher than they've been in past. So most people have the product, or they can get with their factory rep and acquire that product. They may need more used car inventory right now, but there's product available. Mm-hmm. A bigger issue, and you can talk about this if you're seeing it in your stores, is that personnel. Right? Do we have salespeople? Are people wanting to sell cars? Right? Or do they want to be Uber drivers? Right? Because the time and the compensation comes into play.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the hardest thing for me to do is to look a dealer in the face and tell him if he wants to sell 200 cars a month, those 5 salespeople that he has is not going to work. No. They're not going to, but they're really good salespeople, Jim.
They are.
And they're really good salespeople.
But all our things are about ratios, right? And keeping those intact. And so when you look at NADA guides, it says that on average, they don't even give it to 10. So in your example, you would need, 20 salespeople to sell 200 cars.
Yep.
And some guys, yes, we hear stories all the time. They'll sell 15, they might sell 18, they might sell 20. But then you become beholden to them, and they're really just covering up for the guys or gals that are only selling 5 or 6, depending upon what their situation is.
Right.
And I also like to say that they're motivated, capable, qualified salespeople, because you also have maybe salespeople on the roster that are out of town that are dealing with family issues, or on the way out, or aren't engaged. So that ratio on average, I think, is a pretty good barometer. But if you're trying to sell 200 cars and you don't have 20 salespeople, you really should get that handled before you go into the advertising aspect of what it is that you're doing. And that's one of those things.
Yeah.
This Moneyball metric helps you maintain controlled growth, because you can't be operationally inefficient. If you have the advertising going that's driving the traffic to your website, but you don't have the sales personnel to capitalize on that, then the whole thing falls apart.
Right.
And I like to say that you should spend 5 minutes each month. It's not overly complicated, right? But it's the discipline, it's the consistency to look at it each month. I mean, you look at Drew Brees, he knows each play in that playbook.
Right.
And he knows not only where he's going to be, but he knows where the other players on the team are going to be. And so if you don't know where your inventory, your advertising, and your Moneyball Factor are, then you're really not running your dealership operations the way you should. Right.
And there's other issues too that can come up and become unfolded, like process problems, right? There might be follow-up problems, photo problems on the website, some things that are actually really easily detected from just looking at somebody's website, right? That you can see maybe why somebody's running super high or super low on a Moneyball Factor. So it's really interesting for me to take a look historically at dealers, right? And see what kind of they've been running over the past 12 months and see how it's correlated to their net profit, because they know.
They do.
They know, right? So when we take a 12-month kind of a broad look at what their Moneyball Factor looked like for the past 12 months, you kind of see little...
The light bulb goes on. Boom,
boom, where they're like, oh, and it really, really makes sense. So to kind of get that done for you, like on a consultative level, is really telling, super, super telling for any dealer.
And what's interesting to me, it's evolved over time, but we used to have much stronger closes to the month. Mm-hmm. It seems things are more steady state, right? We're not getting the huge Saturdays that we used to get. Right? You get shoppers during the week now. And so because people are really trying to time shift. They don't want to be in line with 30 other people on Saturday. So they figure out a way to come shop on a Wednesday or Thursday. And so those days get bigger. The weekends aren't as big. And so things have a tendency to moderate. And as a result, the sales, you can tell very early in a month where somebody's going to land on that Moneyball Factor. Yeah. Because the shopping interest happens online. and then it gets capitalized on at a later date. I've typically seen around the 15th of the month, you pretty much know where you're going to land. Doesn't matter, you're going to grind more, you're going to hustle more, and you're going to try to close out the month strongly, but it's hard to outrun the pace. And that's one of the things too in our ability to help support controlled growth for our clients is we look at demand side characteristics. And you may want to talk a little bit about what we do with Google and impression share, and I'm happy to fill in on that front. But it kind of extends the Moneyball Factor, which is more operational, and we are a digital sales operation agency,
right,
to kind of the advertising side of operations.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that it's important. And just to your point, if I might add, is for dealer groups maybe that are not familiar with us, it's great to take a look at that kind of overall site of what your dealership has looked like over the past 12 months. But what I think is really cool is when I go to my stores every month over month and I meet with my clients and I'm like, and they can all, some of them are so, they're getting so used to it that they can almost tell, I know my Moneyball Factor was really low last night. I had all my photos went to hell. Like I lost my guy that was taking pictures and my, inventory was terrible. But it's interesting how that kind of, how you can evolve that. And the good thing about that and why I think it's so important with controlled growth is if right? I mean, I think self-awareness is the first step to improvement, right? So if you can see it, if you know what the problems are, you can see it, you can fix it, right? And if I can see it with the numbers, then I can kind of direct and say, hey, this is off, right? So let's shift and fix it before it becomes a problem for the next 60 to 90 days versus maybe just an isolated thing. So yes, so Google, same thing, right? So how we manage budgets is also important, right? And we talk about impression share, which is how often you're showing up for what you have to sell and what are you selling? So you're selling Hondas if you're a Honda dealer. So that's dealer name searches or dealer searches in the area. There's make model, right? Your make, your model, your market. And there's your used car inventory and service, right?
There is.
So how often you're showing up for those four things are very, very important. And as Google's kind of shifting, Jim, I know, I hope you're okay if you can speak about like what your theory is behind how much of your budget should be spent in each of those categories. If you can kind of hit on that because it makes sense, right? We can't always show up first. We can't always be number one. Because we don't have unlimited budget.
Right.
And that's okay. But how do we win? How does the dealer win with that?
Well, I think you're looking at ratios again. It's all about controlled growth. And so you have to know what your cost per sale is. And cost per sale is one of my favorite metrics because it allows you, the dealer, to keep growing. It allows the consumer to continue to receive advertising. It allows the agency to provide proper support as we scale. Because if you can lower your cost per sale, it doesn't mean you can't sell more cars. You actually can. It, in all likelihood, means you're just scaling your operation, and that's what controlled growth is all about. You're going to sell more cars and make more money, right? And you're going to turn that machine up a notch. And that's the thing about the controlled growth. With the inventory that's available, taking the right approach helps you get to a place faster together than you would alone, and that's what we bring to the table. I'll tell you this. I also look at the NADA numbers, and their average spend per dealership is $600+, right?
Okay.
I look at a cost per sale on the digital side being about half of that, but we're continuously trying to drive that cost per sale number down while driving volume up. And one of our favorites of that $300, directionally speaking, about $100 should be going to Google. And here's why. The difference between Google and all other advertising, in my opinion, I'm a big fan of Google. I'm Google certified. I'm in the back end. I know our account directors have access to the geos and details and data that most other companies wouldn't even think about giving to their field teams, right? But that's because we know how powerful it is to know what your auction insights look like. And those auction insights are driven by the intent that consumers have. So when a consumer wants something, basically they Google it.
Right.
Right? And other advertising, TV and radio, and even Facebook at some level, and even YouTube video at some level, it interrupts, right? When you have to watch a 6-second pre-roll video, it's interrupting what it is that you're really trying to watch on the YouTube. But with Google, on the search side of it, which is why we're such big fans of it, you can practice the tenets of controlled growth in such a way that we have standards for our clients on the categories you mentioned. So like on dealer name, we want our clients to be 80 to 90% of the impressions that are available within their geography.
Okay. Right.
And then on make model terms, which can be expensive, so we're having to moderate this. We want to look at their make, their model, their market. It should be around 50%. And because this intent is defined by geography, on the used car side, what do we want our consumers to be at? Our clients to be at in terms of impression share?
I would say 40%, 35% at least, because you're going to be going out broader.
Because people will drive further to come get a used car.
I'll pass a few dealerships, right, if I want that Jeep Wrangler that's on your lot.
That's right.
Right? So,
that's right.
Yeah.
And then as we look, the other element to this, we were talking about the competition, and this is the 9th anniversary, the 9-9 edition. We've got 2 football teams going at it on Monday night, and they're looking for that little extra edge, and that little extra edge comes from knowing what your competition is doing. And the good thing about Auction Insights with Google is I can see if we've got, what kind of dealership do you want today?
Honda.
Okay, so if Janine Loving-Drake Honda is bidding on Jim Flint Honda in my geo, I can know that I own 78% of the impression share, but I'll find out real quickly if you're bidding on my name, and then I can know if there's 45 or 50% impression share that you're securing.
Right.
So it keeps me tuned in to what the competition is doing, because we are in a very competitive space.
Very, very competitive space. Yeah. So knowing all of these things, right? Tracking where you're at and having a goal for where you want to be at is so important. I think now it's more important now than ever in the dealer space, because we are working with very slim margins, right? Cost per sale is more important now than ever as a metric to dealers. I remember way back in the day where, it really wasn't that big of a deal. But now, because margins are so slim, it's a huge deal, right? So if you don't have a vendor partner that understands what that is, that's a problem.
Yeah,
right?
And I'm going to go quick here because I think it's a key component. But one of the things I tell people when we've got a 5 Friday, 5 Saturday month is you want to plan for 350 and sell your way to 300.
Yeah.
And then when you get a month that looks a little shorter, or because of the seasonally adjusted annual rate doesn't make sense to be advertising as aggressively, plan your month for 275 and brace for a possible 300. Yeah. I don't want to explain that any further than that, but for clients that get that, those are the kind of clients we like to work with and support, because we can really help them in that controlled growth in a very pressure-oriented environment. We like that pressure. We're competitors ourselves.
Right. Yeah.
And we really want them to grow.
We really want them to grow and withstand the test of time as well, which it's another retention is a huge piece for us. So
no Bob Beamons.
No Bob Beamons.
No Bob Beamons.
No unicorns. We want lifers. So
well said.
Yeah. So that's about it on controlled growth. If you need any information or would like any information on Moneyball or anything else that we talked about, feel free to go to our website, localsearchgroup.com, or reach out to me or Jim directly.
She's Janine Loving-Drake. I'm Jim Flint. Thank you for your time today on the Automotive Advertising Podcast.
You've been listening to the Automotive Advertising Podcast. If you have questions for Jim or would like to be a guest on the show, please email podcast@localsearchgroup.com.